So our panel is joining us on stage, and panel is going to be chaired by Brit Kirwan, whom all of you know, I think, great academic leader, friend to many of us. Brit was Chancellor Emeritus of the University System of Maryland, former chair of the Board of Higher Education and Workforce, which is the host of this convocation, and was the parent body that produced the 2012 report. So, Brit, I know you're nursing a tennis foot,
yes,
but it's great for you to be with us, and the panel is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. In case anyone's interested, I won the point. I don't know if Freeman is still here, if he had to go back, but just wanted to say how privileged I've been, because I have spent decades working with Freeman, and he is, of course, always an inspiration with his ideas and et cetera. You know, I've always thought if he just had a little more energy, he could really accomplish a lot. The purpose of this panel is to continue to explore this notion of the revitalization of the industry, government, university partnership, by whatever name we want to call it. And, you know, I think earlier today, Jeanette Wing put it very bluntly: this partnership is out of whack. You know, at its core, I think it's because the three elements, of the three entities in this partnership, approach research, as others have noted, from different perspectives. Universities, of course, place a high priority on basic research. The federal labs, the federal government either sponsors research, or at their labs do mission-related research, putting satellites in orbit, ensuring food safety, et cetera. And the private sector, quite naturally, is focused on research related to advancing economic interest. So the question we want to try to explore in this session is how might this partnership be strengthened? I think there's an element here that maybe hasn't been present until recent times, and that is in this era of constrained resources, collaboration and synergy among the three partners would seem to be in everyone's best interest. And certainly our nation needs there to be this greater collaboration. I think it's interesting that the National Academy of Sciences report on the research universities and the future of America, which is in some part, the reason we're all here today, is sort of a retrospective on it, made a very strong case for our universities to become much more engaged in technology transfer. So there seems to be interest and there seems to be opportunity, as I say, given these constrained resources, to create greater synergy. So we have a very distinguished panel to discuss this issue. On my immediate right is Mary Woolley, who's the president of Research America, with, I think all of you know, has a strong focus on research in the health sciences. Next to her is Lynn Scarlett, who is the co-chief external affairs officer of the Nature Conservancy, with a very large portfolio of research responsibilities on environmental issues. And Laurie Leshin, who's president of Worcester Polytechnic University, a very distinguished geophysicist and space scientist, and I think, university co-director of GEER, I guess we call it, yes. GUI is easier to pronounce. Now, their impressive bios are in your materials, so I'm not going to go through any more formal introduction so we can get straight to the substance of the session. So the plan is, as in with the other panel, for me to engage our panelists in a bit of a conversation and then throw the floor open for you to challenge something they've said or ask a question. You've got these very thoughtful and strong leaders here. So let me begin by asking each of our panelists to take a few minutes and offer their assessment of the state of the university, government, industry, research partnerships, and what challenges and opportunities you see on the horizon at this moment. So, Mary, let me start with you.
So, thank you. I think the number one missed opportunity is evident just in the name, whether it's GWIR or GWI or whatever, because it's missing what it's all about, and that's the public, the people. You know, there's a wonderful South African aphorism that comes from the disability community there that's the following: nothing about us without us. Perfect, right? Now, Rush Holt said this morning, you know, where's the public in this room? You know, where's the public, the taxpayer, the citizen, the societal representation and voice in this description? It's not there. Where's the public in these pictures? You know, there's on your program. You know, I like to talk about the importance and actually finally convinced the NIH to stop publishing reports that had the picture of Building 1 on the cover. That's what you got here, folks. It's about people, not pillars. It's not about edifices. No wonder we're looking at public perception that tells us, in capital letters these days, that the edifices and the people that inhabit them are out of touch with the community. It was Abraham Lincoln, been referred to several times today, who said, public sentiment is everything. Without it, nothing can succeed. With it, nothing can fail. But we're missing the public. We, members of the academy, all of us, members of the, if you will, GWIR or whatever partnership, we need to bring people in. In the health community, over time, and it has taken some time, that's been hammered in. And we now talk about the public voice, serving the public's interest through health. And we have the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, PCORI, what a mouthful. We actually had to create that so that we would be sure to involve the public. It wasn't that long ago that women were excluded, systematically excluded, from clinical trials. So it takes time for things to change, but we can learn, I think, from the health community that it is essential to have an equal partnership with the people whose goals we're trying to serve, be it the academy, be it business and industry, be it any part of the government, to be sure. So I think the kind of powerful statements that we see that are about people and are about telling stories are these days not often enough coming from universities or from the academy, this academy. They're coming from, for example, GE, doing those wonderful advertisements on television that are about people's lives and aspirations, and Millie Dresselhaus included. There are McDonald's ad where everything stops while an important envelope is opened by one of the employees, and it reveals that he's been accepted to a university. That's capturing, that's McDonald's strengthening their brand. You know, we need to be learning from industry. And I think that in addition to cease just admiring and re-diagnosing problems like tenure that's not meeting the needs of academia right now, much less the rest of society. We need to get on with taking action. And another action that we need to take is something new. And that's instituting a required course, and I can explain maybe if anyone's interested why I say required, in graduate science education that is about the public context of science. There's always been a public context for science, and that's always included a political context. But students are not introduced to this, and they don't know how to navigate it for years ahead, and they also don't know that it's valuable to understand it. So that would include very basic things, expertise on which exists already on campuses: civics, communication, ethics, regulation, the regulatory environment, the history of science, including its political history. That would be a big step forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Lynn?
Yes, well, we're in Washington, so I'm going to reframe the question. I don't think it's really useful to think of a partnership between government, the academy, the private sector. Science unfolds with many different kinds of focus and therefore many different kinds of partnerships. And what those partnerships look like and what's successful will vary across them. So let me unpack that a little bit and make some distinctions. Many people have referred to the imperative of basic research. We have agency, mission-driven research. We have research, some of it in the medical realm, some of it in the energy realm and other contexts that are really, there's a clear line of sight to an economic return on investment and a keen interest by the private sector. There's other research that really is more foundational and has a public goods dimension to it. Think of some of the underpinnings of our National Weather Service and all the science that goes into ultimately the models that enable us to have those forecasts. Think of a lot of climate science. And then there's the kind of science, the applied science that was done while I was at the Department of the Interior to inform, for example, Everglades restoration. So if you look across that spectrum, those are very, very different. The nature of partnerships, indeed even the level of engagement of citizenry will vary across those. So let me just outline a few characteristics that I do think merit some consideration across all those kinds of partnerships, but they will vary in their form depending upon the context. So first of all, something that our keynote speaker, Freeman Hrabowski, said, and that is innovation. So how many partnerships are you aware of, science partnerships, that sort of ossify? They may have had a purpose, and then sort of lumber along in the same form without revisiting what exactly is it that we're trying to do. So a constant revisitation, sort of self-reflection of the partnership and innovation, I think, is a critical characteristic. But what that innovation looks like will vary. Secondly, critically partnerships, but not just any old partnerships will do. So I would suggest, for example, as I chair the Science Advisory Board and look at the cooperative at NOAA and look at the cooperative institutes, you know, those with a clarity of purpose tend to have greater traction with the agency and consequently perhaps more likely to get continued and robust investment. But also, those partnerships require dialogue over time. And that is not only to readjust and re-examine the purpose, but dialogue over time. And by that, I don't mean one-way communication. Here's knowledge from the academy, I'm giving it to you. It's not a matter of translation. It's a matter of mutual learning. It's a matter of knowledge sharing, because that invites illumination of what might be new problem framings and new research that needs to be undertaken. Let me just give you a sampling of why I think it is important to unpack and think about partnerships rather than partnership, by giving you a glimpse of several of the things we do at the Nature Conservancy. So we are 4,000 people, probably 400 to 500 scientists. And the science work that we do and the partnerships we have include a postdoc fellowship program in which we invest in postdocs in universities, supported by public philanthropy, but also sometimes by the private sector, and for basic research. And it might be basic research that has some deepening of knowledge of the ocean deep, for example, or some deepening of knowledge that might ultimately have a pathway towards some applied purpose, for example, in the energy realm, but it's fundamentally basic research to build intrinsic knowledge. Move along that, we have something that we've launched called a Bridge Collaborative. And we are increasingly seeing the relevance of and the potential intersection between health and nature. The benefits that nature might bring to health, whether it's in enhanced memory, whether it's in treating post-traumatic stress syndrome, whether it's in enhancing respiratory health, cardiovascular health, and so forth. We have entered into a partnership with a university, funded partly by CDC, funded by philanthropists, and also including some of our biologists and nature scientists, if you will, with the medical research community, and actually doing a controlled clinical trial looking at what happens in neighborhood A, disadvantaged neighborhood, when you introduce expanded tree canopy and nature components versus neighborhood B without those introductions. What happens to improvements in health? 10-year study, CDC funded, with an attempt to conform to clinical study requirements. A very different kind of partnership than for example, our work with Dow Chemical, with the state of Texas, with others along the coast to look at natural systems and the degree to which, for example, oyster reef restoration, mudflat restoration, or whatever might attenuate wave action in high-intensity storms. Very much requiring citizen engagement because it affects the place where citizenry is. Any decision-making that might be illuminated by that science will affect those citizens. They need to be part of the mutual learning process. They need to help define, indeed, even the questions asked, and they certainly need to be part of taking that science and thinking about solutions. So I want to stop there. One could go much, much deeper, but I think the whole discussion of by the way, I'd add in NGOs into the mix, non-governmental organizations, but the whole discussion of partnerships for science across the academy, across industry, across the non-governmental context, etc., really requires thinking about purpose and context and the nature of the partnerships, which will result in different kinds of partnerships and different characteristics.
Very good. Laurie?
Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here and for having me today. I'm excited to be a part of this conversation for a couple of different reasons. Obviously, as a university president, I at an institution that is very STEM-oriented. 98% of our graduates graduate with degrees in STEM, so we are the geeks at WPI and proud of it. This is a topic that's near and dear to our heart, but in addition, I spent 6 years as a senior exec in government at NASA here in DC, and so have seen the partnerships from that side. And as you mentioned, I am the university co-chair of GWEAR. Say it with me. GWEAR, right? right, thank you. The Government University Industry Research Roundtable. See, it makes GWIR sound so much better when you try to say the whole thing. So the Government University Industry Research Roundtable here at the academies, which I will talk about probably a little bit later in the panel. And one of the things I would say is an action that all of us can take is to get involved with this organization, because I often leave events like this feeling like, okay, how do I continue this? What's the next step? And there actually is a sort of long-term commitment to this conversation at the academies, and it's through GWIR. So I would invite you all to get involved, and we can come back and talk about that. But so from several different perspectives, I'm excited to be here. I am going to talk a little bit about the role of the university in this partnership space, and based a little bit on the conversation of the panel this morning, although Freeman hit on a lot of the themes that I will probably hit on as well. I feel like it's very easy, and especially in this town, having lived here for many years myself, to sort of say, well, we need more funding, or well, we need government to do this, or we need industry to do this. I personally think universities, we need to look inside, we need to look at ourselves, and we need to ask, how can we play more effectively and more powerfully in this conversation? How can we, and it can't just be, we're doing great stuff, send us money, right? So I think we all know that, and I think connecting to the public is part of it, and really making that a powerful thing is good. But one group of people that I have not heard discussed a whole lot today are students. So at some level, if you think about it, at universities, our students are the public who join with us and who come to us in search of a great experience and a great education and great preparation for their life ahead, be that in career, but also as citizens. And so as we reflect at WPI on what makes great partnerships especially with industry, we often start from the perspective of students, trying to make their experience as relevant and as positive as possible. So just to say a couple of things about the way we think about this. So WPI is a project-based institution. 100% of our 4,500 undergrads complete multiple major projects to graduate. Almost every course they take is project intensive. 3/4 of them do at least one of those projects off campus in a real community somewhere around the world. We're in 47 communities around the planet on 6 continents. They go with faculty into these communities and work with local nonprofit organizations, with government and municipalities, with other universities and with companies in order to truly become embedded in problem solving. We think we want to train the next generation of problem solvers. Obviously, the best way to do that is to actually get them to solve problems that are relevant to society while they are students. And it's something that we're incredibly proud of, this approach to teaching and learning STEM. And the interesting thing for me is that it often provides a great way to open a door with industry partners, because the truth is that in many ways our research agendas and the agendas of companies are not always that well matched. Their agendas are often about the talent pipeline, making sure that they're going to have great, well-trained people to fill the roles that they have going forward. And so when we start by thinking about, hey, how do we get students some great experience that's real world in their education, it begins to build a bridge with industry in a way that can then lead to other kinds of collaborations. And so, part of the question is about what makes a great set of collaborations. For us, it's about multiple avenues of engagement. Oftentimes for us, that starts with collaborative projects with faculty and industry where student project work is involved, but then it might evolve to be graduate education where they realize what an interesting set of activities we have going on, and could we upskill some of their current workforce? Is there a research project that for graduate students that we might work on together? And ultimately, in the case of companies where we have great relationships, it's, hey, we want a physical presence on your campus. Can we name a laboratory so philanthropy gets involved in this work? And it's when you can start to hit on the multiple levels of connection with these companies that I really think the conversation becomes deep and powerful. And it becomes about not just what do we need or what do you need, because oftentimes those aren't the same things, but it becomes about a win-win on both sides. I think the other real characteristic of the successful partnerships is They are not only sort of multifaceted, but they're multi-leveled. So where you have alignment both sort of at the near the top of the university, although I agree with Freeman that there is no such thing as the top of a university, and as well as being driven by either students or faculty. Where that alignment is present, you're much more likely to have substantive conversations and really beneficial partnerships. So those are a couple of the kinds of characteristics of successful partnerships I would say that we've seen at WPI. And just to put it in context, last year we did 100 student projects with companies alone, 75 different companies. Most of them actually paid for or sponsored those projects. And that's not internships and co-ops, which we also do a bunch of, where it's more sort of unidirectional, a student goes. These are collaborative projects, and we're not a huge university. So for us, this is a significant and growing part of how we drive our research agenda, and it makes us much more relevant when we're in those kind of close collaborative conversations with them. And I would love to talk a little bit more about some of the really beneficial outcomes for students around this sort of approach to teaching and learning STEM, in addition to the benefits to the university and the collaborations. But I'll leave that for a future question.
All right, well, great comments, all three of you. I'd like to drill down a little bit and get to maybe some specifics. So let me ask if any of you, or all of you, could give an example of either a specific project, partnership, plural, one of the partnerships, that worked well, and what were the elements of it that made it work, or an attempt at a partnership that didn't work, and what went wrong? So does anyone have one of those in mind?
I can, but you guys go ahead.
All right.
Start. Yeah.
So Lynn, do you want to start?
Yeah.
You don't have to name names now, but
I'm a Pollyanna, so I'm going to give one that worked.
Okay, good.
Ever the optimist. But I want to go back to what I said earlier and put some caveats around this. A lot of the science partnerships with which I have been deeply engaged have in fact been in an applied context and what might be characterized as a problem-solving context. And I want to make that point because what is really important about the success that I described would not necessarily be applicable, let's say, if one were trying to drive a partnership in, say, some basic research. Quite different. So I want to just caveat that. When I was at the Interior Department, the department manages 500 million acres of the United States. 1 in every 5 acres of the United States. Throw a dart on the map and there is some resource management challenge, whether it's Everglades restoration, whether it's post-Katrina recovery, and of course now the sorts of recoveries we're seeing after Maria and Irma and Harvey. There are water challenges at the Klamath, et cetera, et cetera. And it had often been the case that the science to try and inform decision-making in, let's say, Everglades restoration, or the Klamath, or water flows along the Colorado, whatever it might be, had tended to be, here's the science, use it. A kind of unidirectional flow, and if there were any additional thoughts about it, they were in terms of translation. We have knowledge, we have wisdom coming out of a university partnership in which the Department of the Interior might have invested. But it's a little complicated, so we need to translate it for the agencies, et cetera, that might use it. There's a growing body of literature in the sociology of science about how people learn and how people uptake knowledge. And it turns out, not surprisingly, that unidirectional, here's my knowledge plunk, is not necessarily conducive to good uptake. That we have found, and we certainly found this in a number of these collaborative partnerships, Sonoyta Valley Planning Partnership in Tucson for water management and other resource management challenges, that upfront engagement by scientists with the, say, affected stakeholder community that would be implicated in any changed management regime was critical, both to help refine the problem set. What is it that people really care about? What concerns do they have? You know, is it water quality? Is it water flows? Is it both of the above? Is it something else? Is it the fire regime? Whatever it might be. And then utilize that to actually inform the shaping of the science, the questions asked, the research undertaken. And one of the things that we have found in what U.S. Geological Survey came to call joint fact-finding, describing that process, was that when you did that, you tend to get people then to actually focus on the science, what it illuminates, and on the solution sets, that is, the responses, rather than what one had often got in these contexts of high divisiveness, of what I'll call data battles. Here's my bunch of science, here's your bunch of science, mine's better than yours, we debate over that, and never the problem is addressed and solved. So, so I will say joint fact-finding, collaborative science decision-making with a lot of upfront engagement and mutual learning, which is not only about the science knowledge, but what it is that folks care about is critically important. Not the same in a basic research context.
Right, but you know, I've learned a new term called design thinking. And it sounds like to me that what you're describing is a form of where the scientists are actually going out into the community and
that's it. Yeah. And by the way, you know, a lot of scientists that I worked with at U.S. Geological Survey or elsewhere are always nervous about credibility, objectivity. Better not engage too much with those decision makers. This is not about that. It is not the scientists making the decision.
Right.
It's about the scientists helping people frame the problem set.
Right. That's
and then
very
understand
interesting.
what information is needed to help understand and address it.
Now, Laurie, I want you to, if you can, give us one that failed.
Oh, no.
Not at your university.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, well, I guess I haven't been there long enough to necessarily see one wax and wane in that way. But I do want to really echo this. So this is exactly the global projects model at WPI, except all of the people who are going into these communities, they're faculty curated, so the faculty go with them, but they're 19 and 20-year-olds who are learning to do science in exactly this way. So imagine how the world will change if we were teaching all of the scientists and engineers in the world to engage with those people who their invention and innovation is going to impact and affect in the process of doing it. And by the way, all this stuff about STEM versus humanities and social sciences, that all goes away when there are actual humans in the equation from the beginning. And so, and the fascinating thing to me is, the way that we do this is that our, we'll typically send 6 teams of 4 with 2 faculty in Namibia or, Australia or New Zealand. We have project centers all over the world. So it changes the faculty too, because this is not only about problems that you can address with, that are solved in the back of the book, right? These are real world problems and not necessarily always problems that they are absolute experts in. And it changes the way they think about approaching all of their research. And so in my mind, again, it's really a win-win where you're developing the workforce of the future that companies are just crawling over themselves to hire, because guess what? They've solved real-world problems in real communities and diverse teams and really difficult circumstances in some cases, in many cases. And so the talent pipeline is there, and the faculty get to really see some of the global challenges, the grand challenges that we talk about here at the National Academies in such human context that it changes the way they're thinking about their own research. The example I was actually going to give is a partnership with GE that we've had that's been growing over time. And I think, given some of the challenges at GE now, maybe you come back to me in a couple of years and we'll see if it's one that continues to be successful. But it has been one that's been built over many years, where it, again, kind of started with a lot of discussions about shared interest. And they really bought into this idea of our project model, and so they helped support one of our project centers, actually our project center in Cape Town, South Africa, doing all kinds of things from helping, battered women's shelters to clean water to, all sorts of interesting societal challenges, not all hardcore technology challenges. And that went well, and then we started working with them on in Boston, since they've come to have moved their headquarters there. They wanted to start a summer internship program with interns from 5 local colleges, including us, and they were going to say, we're going to do this, it's going to be great, because we're going to have the students do half work here at GE and half work in the community. And I said, really, what kind of community work are they going to do? Oh, I don't know, we're working with the mayor's office, I dig ditches or build houses or whatever. Like, no. Let's talk about how they could do some really impactful projects. So we actually partnered with GE, and we helped them design the project work for the students to do. And then as a result, again, of that continued and deepened collaboration, we're just launching a big research activity around advanced medical devices and Internet of Things in health and medicine. And they've become a multi-million-dollar investor now in that lab, along with our state government in Massachusetts. And it's a great example, again, of that government-university industry collaboration.
And it's building off of,
building.
Start with one project, and that creates a relationship.
Exactly.
And you grow that relationship into other.
And I would argue that often the best way to start these relationships with industry is around students and thinking about student work.
Yeah, because they're interested in the talent.
You betcha.
Mary, were you going to say?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to not name names in a
Good, I want to hear one where it didn't work. Let's learn. What went wrong?
Well, things went wrong until they started going right.
Okay.
Okay, so let me frame it that way. So actually, it has to do with NIH and with industry partners, and the coming together around what seemed like such an obvious problem that was ripe for a solution, kind of devolved initially into versions of what size the table was, that we were going to meet around, and disagreements that about how to frame the problem, and things that are normal to all of us who get engaged in trying to find solutions. But the stakes seemed to be so high to everybody that they wanted it, and it wasn't only NIH, by the way, it was FDA and some other relevant federal agencies, of just trying to force a solution from their perspective. And the failure of the group to gel and of leadership to take it forward was painful for quite a while. And I think it actually took a leadership change and a few people in the group changing out and over. And then really great things actually did start happening. But because it was a new venture in an area that, as I said, it just seemed so obvious that why can't we get this solved? I would say leaving that aside before I say any more about it accidentally, there remain just seemingly intractable problems in the university, government, industry combined sectors that affect our health and research for health every day. Why can't electronic health research records talk to each other, for heaven's sake, right? Why, you just fill in the blank. There's just so many things that no longer make any sense. They have nothing to do with technological capacity. They have a lot to do. Somebody earlier today was talking about the difficulties of finding what is a platform technology, in fact, and then being able to add value by differentiating beyond that. There's still so much battling for essentially monopoly control over various areas of the health community. It's really in our way, and I would say there's a lot of failed experiments to fix those as well.
Yeah. And I would just say one other thing about failure when it happens, and we do see it. I think that the structure of industry and universities don't always match up very well, and so when you've got sort of lots of people operating on different levels without good coordination and with just some conversation about a shared commitment, and that's when things do tend to go wrong. So we created a sort of a concierge service so people are not kind of coming in at all different levels. We try to provide a single front door to the university for partners in this way, and that has helped. But before that, we would have a lot of, oh, you were talking to that person? Well, I was talking to that person from that same company, and they didn't know anything about that. And
I'm going to add two other dimensions to the what doesn't work so well or what hasn't worked, without naming names or pointing to particulars. Increasingly, particularly around problem-centered research, yes. There is a demand, an essential demand for transdisciplinary work. That is, when you're addressing, as the Nature Conservancy does, how to enhance resilience in the context of climate change in an urban space, for example. That involves many ologies, many different kinds of sciences, including social sciences, natural sciences, engineering, etc. What doesn't work is when one embarks on that problem-centered partnership under the guise that it will be transdisciplinary, but in fact, there's a sort of a quick fractionation of the components, the different ologies that might be involved, sort of back into their wheelhouses, doing their work separately. Because it's out of the intersections that often comes some of the real insights and pioneering work. And so that's one characteristic, and it's increasingly challenged as we hear more and more the need for transdisciplinary work. One other thing I'll say is I mentioned this research we're doing on the intersection of health and nature, and a particular research study in Kentucky that we're doing, the clinical study. In addition to that, and in order to set the table for amplifying more of that kind of research, we have something called a bridge collaborative, working with the medical sector, the public sector, multiple different kinds of agencies, the world of conservation biologists, the nature scientists, the academic community, the NGO community. And the Bridge Collaborative really is about bringing the health research community and the natural resource community together before any actual research project to really examine language challenges, research protocol differences, so that we can then better understand these two highly diverse communities. And then out of that, figure out how do we build a research partnership. And so it's that sort of setting the stage that is critical. And the failure to do that can mean you're constantly talking at cross purposes.
Right.
Well, I'm going to turn to the audience. So if you have questions, please make your way to the microphones. And while people are, I have a pet question I want to ask for any of you to respond to. When I was president of the University of Maryland, I was very good friends with Bill Brody, who was president of Johns Hopkins, and he was just an evangelist on the notion that the problem with greater partnerships is universities just very possessive control of intellectual property, the unwillingness to let go of the intellectual property to build the partnership. So he was very, very persuasive when I heard him, but I think he was sort of a lone wolf to some extent. So in your opinion, is that an issue for us in trying to strengthen this collaboration?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Yes, I think it is. I mean, look, I would love to say that we could all make wonderful pre-competitive partnership stuff in every field and get tons of industry buy-in to that. But the truth is that, again, you got to ask hard questions about what are the goals of each one of the partners. And so yes, I think thinking that it's all going to be done in some pre-competitive way so that IP isn't an issue, or that you've invented the next Gatorade, and therefore your university
Exactly.
shall soon be very rich. And by the way, for somebody at Hopkins to say that is something, because they probably do get a lot of IP revenue. I think of it like Division I sports. There's like 5 universities that are in the black. Everybody else is
wonderful
in the
analogy.
red, but everybody's doing it, right?
Right.
And so I do think it's something we've got to continuously work on. I'm thinking differently about.
That's a very good point. So let's start this time at this microphone, and please introduce yourself and then make your comment.
Sure. So my name's Mark Kuzno. I'm the Director of Learning and Technology for the Boeing Company. And so my perspectives from the industry, and so I echo that it's definitely about the talent pipeline, things that we consider. So there's a lot of truth to that. So I know this conversation's around university, industry, government partnerships for research, but also I'm interested in education, partnerships in education. Universities tend to have the best content. They tend to have the most forward-thinking, partly because of all that research that they're doing. And I'm finding that the innovation that's coming into Lynn's point is really at those intersections of non-adjacencies and domains.
Yes.
And so one of the things that we're looking at, we're becoming more and more interested in partnering with universities to find that content. I want to tap into that content. The challenge is, though, is not in a degree format, but more in certificates, micro-credentials. And I'm just interested in what the panel's perspective is, and this is to the President of the University of Maryland. This is that genius of and. It's not saying degrees or
Right.
micro-credentials.
It is.
Right.
It's all the
both,
above.
right?
Yep.
And so what is the panel's perspective on micro-credentialing, partnering with industry to bring those types of programs together so that we can further, on both sides?
Yeah.
Buddy?
I, of course, have an opinion about this as a college president who does a lot of corporate education. So one, we should exchange cards after this because we're about to put online a competency-based autonomous vehicles certificate program and thinking about credentials.
And we just made a minority investment, yes, yeah.
Okay, great, perfect. So we're thinking about this a lot, and I think again there is starting to be this more national conversation about the future of work and how we have to think very differently about this notion that, well, first I go to college and then I go to work and then I retire and like never the three shall meet. It's got to be much more of a learning and doing and learning and doing and learning and doing kind of an engagement, and that requires much more chunkable or different size chunks and much more personalized timing. So when I need what I need when I need it, kind of an approach to engaging students. So we're thinking a lot about this. There are a lot of universities that are thinking a lot about it, and I think it's coming. One thing I will say is that we have yet to, so we do at the graduate level do certificate programs and a little bit of alternative credentialing, but more in a cohort model with companies. We have not yet seen a huge demand on the sort of in the career center side for people who have a different credential. There is still a ton of value in that core credential, that bachelor's, that master's degree. So the good news is I don't think this is a threat to that. I think it's a way to layer on top of that a bunch of interesting ways of engaging with learners throughout their lives. We know the half-life of a lot of the knowledge that we work with our students to gain is pretty short in today's world. And so we've constantly got to be thinking about upskilling and reskilling as we go through our careers. So I'm with you, and I think it's something that's very much needed. And a lot of universities are thinking about it. This kind of curricular innovation doesn't always come naturally. And so you've got to find the places that are really willing to engage deeply with you as a company and think about how they could serve the needs.
Yeah,
I want to just
looking at fostering that lifelong learning
Correct.
through programs like this.
Correct.
So.
I want to add to that it may not only be the university setting that provides that ongoing and tailored learning. So in many respects, an organization like the Nature Conservancy, we operate in all 50 states, 70 countries, around problem sets with companies, for example, on examining the role that ecosystem services might play in their particular lines of business. By definition, it's a learning, doing context. We bring scientists in, they are working on problems with other people in a multidisciplinary context, with industries around specific needs, and out of that comes people with a kind of tailored learning experience.
Yeah.
You know, Laurie, some of these micro-credentials, I think some institutions are thinking about the ability to stack them.
Stackable,
and
yep.
actually have people end up with a
You bet.
full-scale
That's right. And I
master's.
think that's
just
a very different sort of timing model than we're used to.
I think we should be optimistic, absolutely, about this one. I know I'm aware of the growth in professional science master's degrees that just didn't exist 20 years ago, let's say, and now I think there's 300 or more around the country, and certificates in so many different ways. I think the universe of colleges and universities and beyond, lifelong
A lot of
learning
professional
is
societies are
ready,
thinking hard
is
about
ready.
this, which is great.
If you go on the edX website, you'll be amazed at the number of very distinguished universities that are offering micro credentials. So thank you for your
definitely.
comment.
I'm on the corporate advisory board for edX as
Oh,
well. So,
very good.
so anybody that's interested, I got a lot of universities here. I'd love to talk to anybody that's interested in credentials.
Okay, so let's turn to this. I think
Mike Lubell, professor of physics at CCNY. Lynn, you mentioned the issue of transdisciplinary partnerships or programs and so forth. Mary alluded to the tenure issue in universities. Wonder whether you can address the structural question. We are very siloed in many places. We have departments of physics and chemistry and biology, and somebody's got to get tenure in one department or the other, even if they're working in an interdisciplinary area. And I can tell you, as a former department chair, I was involved in battles galore like this to try to hold off faculty who said, well, this person has a PhD in chemistry, can't be in the physics department. And then, of course, on the industry side, very often they're looking for a particular kind of expertise. I was, this last year, asked to write a letter of recommendation for an extraordinarily talented guy in photonics who's in Austria, marvelous communicator, wonderfully smart, creative individual. IBM didn't hire him because he didn't do his PhD in materials. He could have done it. He could have worked there. But again, even in industry, you wind up, we need somebody right away to solve this specific problem. So what do we do about the structures that we have in place? How do we break down those barriers?
That's a tough one. So I'm not sure I could answer the industry question. Probably somebody from industry could answer that better than I. I will say that I think you do need to incentivize, all humans follow incentives. I mean, it's well known. And the incentive of the tenure criteria and process and the promotion criteria and process are significant in really sort of driving towards this paper counting kind of approach that we do tend to have. We did just change our promotion criteria at WPI to be much more broadly inclusive for people who are familiar with Boyer's work on different kinds of scholarship of teaching and the scholarship of engagement, which is all about engaging real people in real communities and thinking about how you would evaluate that. We have just included these other ways of thinking about scholarship as part of our promotion criteria. This is actually our first year through trying to put people through with the new criteria and thinking about how you get them externally assessed, which we still would want to do as part of our promotion process. So it's going to me, be we're doing a really fascinating experiment about this. But if it's successful, I feel like we're irresponsible as institutions by just saying the only way you can get tenure or promoted is by doing basic research, which results in 1 million papers and a bunch of genetic copies of yourself, most of whom will not end up in academia, by the way. And so what are some other pathways to success? And by doing it this way, I would say we also much better position ourselves to have great collaborative partnerships with industry because we're thinking about things, again, more broadly. So we'll see how it goes.
Let me make a few observations. It definitely is a challenge. And indeed, when I was at the Department of the Interior, even a public agency like the U.S. Geological Survey had the very same challenge as the academic world. That is, their performance measures were, like the world of the academy, based on what deep research did they do that got published in such and so and such and so and such and so. And so we explored having a separate track where you could begin up that track and then bifurcate if you wanted to go into the sort of applied problem-solving mode. We actually didn't succeed in getting that done, at least not at the time. Maybe they have done so now. But that was our conscious awareness of the value of having people who really liked that line of work, but also were concerned about their career advancement and so forth. I guess the second thing I would say, though, and the people that are in the world of the academy will much better be able to speak to this than I. We are increasingly attracting PhD scientists who very deliberately want to work in the context of problem solving and that interdisciplinary context and that exposure to adjacencies, to use the word that was used by the previous questioner. And those folks are actually migrating out of the academy and into a place like the Conservancy, where we by necessity have to put Humpty Dumpty together again. The problem solving we do requires all that transdisciplinarity. So there is that. That doesn't help the academy, but it is an outlet. And what we are finding is, our folks do a lot of peer-reviewed publications. So out of the work they are doing that is bringing these multiple knowledges together are coming, peer-reviewed publications of note. So it's not like a dead end to your sort of research and publication-oriented.
And I bet those folks are more diverse than the typical traditional basic research folks as well. I mean, that's the other beauty of this way of thinking about it, is the diverse folks from different backgrounds are very attracted, I think, to this idea of solving real problems in real communities.
Now, by the way, I will say I don't think that's the answer to the question you gave, because you need to figure that out within the academy too. But it is just to suggest that there is a demand for that kind of interdisciplinary work, and therefore avenues for people to pursue it.
And I would just add that it doesn't have to be viewed as an intractable problem. In an effort to not be focused on politics every second of every day, I've been reading more broadly than I have in years, to be honest. So I ran across the following quote from a world leader, quote, "A talent for following the ways of yesterday is not sufficient to improve the world of tomorrow," unquote. Isn't that great?
Yogi Berra said it this way: the future ain't what it used to be.
I'll tell you who said this. Well, it was King Woolley in 307 BC, the kingdom of Zhou in northeastern China.
Mary,
but not a
these
Great quote.
As I said, I've been reading broadly to escape.
Great. That is great.
Ben Schneiderman, University of Maryland. Thank you. I'm very cheered by this afternoon's panel and the good enthusiasm and energy around problem-oriented research. And thanks, Brit, for mentioning design thinking, which I think is an important aspect to get that the issue framed so well. And the contrast I want to make in this morning, we heard a kind of whining attitude about the need for curiosity-driven research. Well, I think there are many forms of curiosity-driven research, and one of the curiosities that I would like to encourage is that faculty think about the curiosity about solving real problems. So basic research and applied at the same time, curiosity-driven and problem-driven at the same time, does seem to work. And here's the evidence, and I'm looking for your response. Brad Fenwick from Elsevier was helpful to me in collecting this data, that the papers, and the 70 million papers in Scopus, of those that have academic authors with a business or government co-author, are on average cited twice as much as those that are academic only. And I find that very powerful in making the case to my colleagues, and I wonder how you make the case to your colleagues that the kind of curiosity-driven basic research they want are those that solve real problems.
Yes. Well, that's great. Yeah.
So, I'm going to, oddly, because I'm in the problem-solving world, like we do stuff and actually try to, on the ground, enhance resilience or whatever it might be. I appreciate that point, and curiosity comes in many forms. But I do want to put a plug in, as everyone in this room I'm sure does, for basic research. I mean, deepening knowledge is important intrinsically, not simply instrumentally. And of course, that deep knowledge does ultimately, in many ways, inform our understanding of broader problem sets and the solution sets. But I do want to say I don't think we're on the pathway if we think all science investment should be centered on problem solving. There is a role for just that intrinsic knowledge building, because who knows what springs from it, frankly.
Well, you know, Vannevar Bush said, inevitably that basic research leads, and that's not true.
Yeah.
And so
That's true.
the kind of curiosity-driven research I want to encourage and promote are those that are tied to real problems. It seems to me that kind of knowledge is more likely to produce the benefits they want and the breakthrough theories that are so valuable. Thank
Well,
you.
you know, Ben, I just remind us all of our colleague Freeman's
got
comment about the tyranny of the or.
That's right.
We can
Yep.
have
And.
base.
It is an and.
It's
for
an
sure.
and.
Yeah, we can have the and here. I mean, curiosity-driven research, solving real problems, as well as just pure basic research. It doesn't have to be one.
I think that the tension this morning and the whining about keeping that just seemed to be misplaced. I'm very cheered by what I've heard.
Well,
this
good.
afternoon.
So we have just a few more minutes and no other questions. So I'm going to let Laurie say just a word about GWIR.
Thank you.
And you know, you're set up to do exactly what we've been talking about here at
Yes.
this. So what are you doing?
Thank you. So,
All right.
so GWIR, and again, do people know, are your organizations members of GWIR? Raise your hand if you think you
Tell
are.
them real quickly.
Okay,
what it
I
is.
will. So GWIR is a Government University Industry Research Roundtable. It was the first roundtable at the Academies, founded over 30 years ago. Susan Sloan is here in the back of the room. Raise your hand, Susan. She's the director of it. So she can talk to me afterwards. You can talk to her afterwards. We have typically what happens is university and industries come in as paired members. That's not a requirement, but we like it when that way. So it's an opportunity for you at a university to build a partnership with an industry partner and come in together. The roundtable meets 3 times a year for a dinner and 3/4 of a day the next day on various topics. And what I would say is about half the topics are on emerging kind of cool research areas. So whatever you're kind of just seeing emerging right now is probably something that we're going to be talking about at our next meeting. So in the last couple of years, we've talked about the 4th Industrial Revolution, which is all about integration of Internet of Things into everything, but especially into industry. Our upcoming meeting in February is on AI and its role in translation. So again, a strong connection to the research enterprise there. We've worked on smart communities, on critical infrastructure security, all kinds of interesting challenges that both universities and industry and government agencies care about. And then the other half of our conversations tend to be about more the business of research. So beyond patents, assessing the value and impact of research investments. We just had a great meeting on the role of state governments in economic development and research. So these are all topics that somebody probably on your university campuses or somebody in your company or somebody in your government agency is interested in. We get very high level participation from most of the research-oriented government agencies at these meetings and involved in these conversations. So it is a great way just to build those relationships, to build those connections, and to take it from there. So I invite you all to think about becoming a member of GWIR. Thanks.
Terrific. Well, we've reached the end of our time, but I'd like you to please thank our panelists for a great conversation. Okay, great job. Thank you, Mary.
Doing a good job moderating.
Thank you so much. Great job.
Thank you, Brit. Thank the panel. So in a minute, we're going to take a break, but we'd like to show a short video, very short video produced by the AAU. Toby Smith is here. Toby, are you in the room someplace? Toby is back here. So those of you who don't know him, there he was. If you have any feedback, he would appreciate having that. So let's roll the film now and then hold off just a second for the break.
80 years. You're a scientist with a big idea, an idea that can change the world. But without the funding to pay for research, you can't make a whole lot of progress. But then, something unexpected happens. World War II. Back in Washington, the federal government realizes that if it's going to win, it's going to need all the big ideas it can get. Big ideas like yours. So it figures out a whole new way to get them by investing money in research universities. This changes everything. Flash forward to right now. We won the war, science is everywhere, and it's universities that help make it happen. From lasers to the polio vaccine to the screen you're using to watch this video. Today, if you're a scientist with a big idea, you know just where to go. Universities are perfect for research that's more about making discoveries than making a profit. These discoveries brought us to the moon and will take us to Mars. They grow the economy, save lives, and bring the future closer every day. There's a word for that, progress. And it's not going to pay for itself. That's why it's more important than ever that we support our partnership with research universities today for a better America tomorrow.
Thank you very much. So feedback to Toby when you get a chance.